Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the Milsimmer's Guide. In our last video, we talked about how you as an individual could use skills like terrain-based movement and situational awareness to maximize your survivability on the battlefield. As an infantryman, not dying has a lot to do with simply not getting spotted and being the one to spot the enemy first. Many different skills come together to produce the result we're looking for, and it can be summarized as having a constant sense of paranoia. I also made the last video assuming you were working individually, which begs the question, what if you have friends with you? When you're not alone and have some buddies to rely on, you are much stronger and can use teamwork to apply the same principles to superior effect. But with other people come new challenges with coordinating everybody and ensuring you're all on the same page. So in today's video, we'll discuss the tools that you can use to properly coordinate a group of guys to best move about the battlefield. Specifically, how to use fireteam formations to optimize your relative positioning and maximize your situational awareness by dividing sectors of responsibility. And also, how to use unit movement techniques to ensure your group can simultaneously shoot and move in an organized fashion. I do have a similar video on my channel, but that one is more focused on the purpose of formations writ large. This video is focused on specific doctrine at the fireteam level and includes information about more than just formations. My personal experience on this topic comes from training as an infantryman in the South Korean Marine Corps, but today's video draws primarily from publicly available US Army and Marine Corps doctrine. I use my personal experience to bridge the gaps often found in textbook doctrine by focusing on principles rather than strict rules. That said, if you're a former member of the US military and notice any discrepancies or missing details regarding your doctrine, please let me know in the comments and I'd be happy to add clarifications or footnotes in a pinned comment if needed. So before diving into the details, let me briefly outline the purpose of this video, what my objectives are, and what I think are the value of formations and doctrine. First, this video is not a gameplay guide for conflict mode on Reforger. While you might find the content useful if you practice it with friends in a dynamic, unpredictable setting, its primary purpose is to serve as a field manual that introduces real-world doctrine for Milsim players. The best scenario for applying this video's insights would be during a hardcore Game Master session designed to mimic real-life situations, featuring 1 life per player, minimal HUD, limited map information, and restricted radio communications. Second, understanding the true benefits of formations, rather than seeing them as mere shapes that people stand in, can be pretty challenging from a basic rifleman's perspective, especially if you're not used to relying on teammates for mutual support and effective communication. However, adopting the viewpoint of the leader helps to understand that formations and rehearsed maneuvers are ultimately about keeping effective control over the unit and delegating responsibilities without a deliberate process. Consequently, strong leadership or a well-trained, cohesive team is essential to reap the benefits here. And finally, the value of doctrine isn't so that you can translate it to the battlefield one for one. Sometimes you can, but the real benefit is the codification of key principles, that when you learn them through idealized examples, you can adaptively tailor them to the reality of the battlefield in front of you by using creative problem solving. So with that, let's dive into the specific doctrine of fireteam formations. There are a lot of possible formations that you can arrange a standard 4-man fireteam in, but for 90% of situations, there are only 4 primary formations that you need, and these are the fireteam wedge, column, file, and line. The standard wedge formation of the United States Army is arranged with the fireteam leader in the lead. Trailing to one flank is the automatic rifleman. Together, these two individuals form the first buddy team. They are paired together so that the leader has direct control over that belt-fed M249 saw, which as the light machine gun is doctrinally, and according to long-held infantry maxim, the most casualty-producing weapon of the fireteam. Generally, any heavy weapon in the team will stay close to the leader so that they can direct its fire. Opposite of the automatic rifleman is the grenadier, and trailing behind the grenadier on the long side of the wedge is the rifleman. Together, the grenadier and rifleman form the fireteam's second buddy team. The wedge is considered the default formation because it's very flexible, which makes it ideal for dealing with uncertain situations. The fireteam leader can very easily control his unit simply by moving, and it's very difficult for the wedge to be enfiladed by enemy fire from any one direction. Also, the unit can easily maintain situational awareness and project firepower in 360 degrees. For security, each member has a sector they're responsible for, with the fireteam leader watching the front, the automatic rifleman and grenadier watching the flanks, and the rifleman watching the rear. In USMC doctrine, what they call the wedge is more of what the Army might call a diamond formation. The diamond effectively shares the same characteristics as the wedge, it's just that the trail guy is tucked in the rear. So yes, the shape is different, and there are 3, not 4 guys with unobstructed lines of fire to the front, but functionally these two are used in the same way. Notice how dispersed these individuals are in the formation. The standard dispersion between individuals should be about 10 meters. That interval can expand and contract depending on the terrain, with the most important determining factor being that everybody needs to have direct line of sight to the fireteam leader. So in dense brush, that interval might shrink to be as little as 2 to 3 meters and might expand to as much as 15 to 20 meters between individuals in open terrain. The overall shape of the wedge also changes according to the terrain. Sometimes the formation might move slowly. Maybe the fireteam is anticipating enemy contact and they're watching for enemies, so the wedge will become more blunt and start to resemble a line. Other times, the fireteam will be conducting rapid movement, maybe in closer terrain, so the wedge will become sharper, making it easier for each man to simply follow the one in front. The most important thing is the fireteam's characteristics, not the shape. As long as everybody can see the fireteam leader, have their sector and fields of fire, and maintain dispersion, they don't need to keep the perfect rigid shape. Individuals should flex back and forth in their position according to the terrain using the cover around them, not railroading themselves to a specific position relative to their teammates. The trailing rifleman on the long side of the wedge might tuck himself in without explicit instructions if the terrain dictates, then fan back out as necessary. You'll notice that it is a formation capable of very smoothly transitioning to other formations depending on the situation. So if we assume that these guys here are in the middle of rapid movement, they could transition to the fireteam column. The fireteam column is our second primary formation. It is formed by the 2 outer guys in the wedge falling in behind the 2 inner guys. It's a simple change that nonetheless significantly impacts fireteam command and control. The column sacrifices flexibility as it's no longer in the best position to deal with enemy contact, especially to the front. But because you have 2 guys trailing behind the other 2, it is very easy to keep together, control, and is therefore more mobile. This is the ideal formation for rapid and/or extended movement, particularly along roads. Again, the guys are maintaining 360-degree security, similar to how they did for the wedge. If the terrain becomes restricted, you'll see the formation close to a single file. This often happens along narrow trails, alleyways, or during limited visibility conditions such as at night. The file is the default movement formation in limited visibility because the challenge of maintaining effective control in those conditions typically outweighs the usual concerns of dispersion or vulnerability, even when the men are equipped with tools like night vision. This formation is only used when absolutely necessary because, as you can see, it's very ill-equipped to deal with threats to its front, with only a single man having a clear line of fire, and the entire formation is vulnerable to enfilading fire from the front or rear. The fireteam members' sectors are divided by having the lead man watch the front, the trail man watch the rear, and the middlemen alternating left and right security. And last but not least is the line formation. It is the inverse of the file, not just in shape, but in its use case. You'll only use it when enemy positions are known and you're doing something like assaulting across an objective, sweeping across an area, or pursuing the enemy, typically moving very short distances slowly. USMC Doctrine has what they call a skirmishers formation, which is very similar but has less rigidity. The staggered shape means that it shares the forward firepower of the line, albeit with the 2 rearward guys having more limited angles, but they're not as vulnerable to enfilading fire from the flank should they be surprised by an enemy. And just a side note, in practice, these 2 formations are the same because again, the point isn't the shape, but rather the characteristics, and each individual should be positioning to maximize their use of cover and concealment rather than maintain an assigned position. Yo, you may have noticed that a lot of the B-roll in this video is footage of actual players demonstrating the formations and techniques being described. This is the fantastic work of the Dance Milsim Community Demonstration Team, a group of dedicated individuals who've decided to help me make these videos the best they can be. If you're interested in visualizing small unit tactics in the most authentic way possible, or have real-world expertise you'd like to contribute, please join my Discord server link below and let us know. Now back to the video. So that brings us to our next topic, fireteam movement. Generally, movement isn't very complicated at this scale. The fireteam is meant to operate as a singular whole and will be sticking together in battle. So most unit movement techniques you'd use at a larger scale don't apply yet. However, there is a surprising amount of nuance depending on the situation you face. One thing to consider when conducting a movement out of contact is the employment of the Pointman. When the fireteam is the lead element in a larger formation or is traveling alone and enemy contact is possible or likely, it'll want to utilize a Pointman as an advance guard element that precedes everybody else. His job is to look for enemies along the unit's path and act as a feeler to make first contact without putting everybody else at risk. At best, he's early detection. At worst, he's bait. Note that the Pointman is not in charge of navigation. His full attention should be on watching his surroundings. Therefore, it's also important for the Pointman, even as he's extended out front, to maintain contact with his team leader, who is in charge of navigation with the compass and map. The navigator sets the unit's destination and general direction of movement, and the Pointman picks the exact route to those destinations based on his judgment and his read of the terrain. Now, movement outside of contact is one thing, but movement at the fireteam level changes when it is engaged in a firefight. Rather than cruising around in a formation like the staggered column, it'll be using formations like the Line or Skirmishers formation and using techniques such as bounding or peeling. So first, let's talk about the fireteam advancing together online. Oftentimes, the fireteam will move as a singular whole during a firefight, and in such cases, the fireteam will form a line or a skirmishers formation and advance together, engaging targets as they see them. This sort of movement during a fight while online is most useful when the fireteam leader wants to maintain centralized control of his men, such as when advancing short distances. This has its uses, but isn't always practical in every situation. When the fireteam is taking heavy enemy fire or is engaging enemies as it advances over a longer distance, they can break down into buddy teams and bound forward one buddy team, while the second buddy team covers them with fire. This allows the fireteam to conduct self-contained fire and movement in an organized and controlled fashion. At the fireteam level, typically one bound will be all you need to end the tactical situation due to the smaller scales involved. However, should multiple bounds be needed, there are two types of bounding you can use: successive and alternate. Successive bounding is when the first bounding element advances, then the second bounding element advances to be online with the first. And in my opinion, this is the most useful at the fireteam level because it's the most secure, easiest to control, and keeps everybody together, ideal for use in close assaults. Alternate bounding is when the first bounding element advances, then the second bounding element advances past the first to gain additional ground. This method allows for more rapid movement than successive bounding, which can be useful depending on the terrain or tactical situation, such as when you're crossing an open area or when you're bounding backwards to break contact from the enemy. Sometimes the fireteam needs to keep as many guns in the fight while minimizing the exposure of the moving element, so the fireteam can advance one individual at a time. This creates a pattern where only one man is bounding while three are covering. It is useful to maximize covering fire and minimize exposure. Other times, the fireteam leader cannot centrally control the unit because of the chaos and fog of war inherent to combat. In these cases, the fireteam can use individual buddy rushes where the fireteam breaks down into buddy team pairs and each alternates bounding one individual at a time while the other covers. Unlike the buddy team bounds we discussed earlier, this method of movement is different because of its decentralized nature, making it useful when central control by the leader is no longer possible. So far, we've been discussing all of this bounding in the context of an assault when you're advancing into the enemy. But note that all of the exact same techniques can be applied in reverse when you want to retrograde away from the enemy to gain space or break contact. So when bounding, the moving element would be going backwards, while the firing elements stay behind to cover their retreat and rinse and repeat. All of the same techniques and factors apply as in the advance. One specific technique that's different from bounding, which you can use to break contact, is the peel, also called the Australian peel. And this is a technique that's a very useful complement to bounding. That is because bounding is best suited for movement perpendicular to the long axis of your formation. It's hard to bound in a direction parallel to the long axis without first conducting a formation change. Peeling provides the ability to initiate an immediate break contact without any prerequisite maneuvers or in restricted terrain. Situations where this might be necessary are when you take contact from the flanks while traveling in a file formation, or when you take contact from the front while traveling in a column. The standard peel is the side peel, which can go either left or right depending on which way you want to go. It's initiated from the file when you take contact from the flank, and everybody faces the enemy and engages, forming a firing line. You could also initiate it from the line while engaging enemies to your front if you want to conduct a movement to the flank. The peel would start with the team leader calling peel left if you wanted to initiate a leftwards movement. The rightmost man would then shout moving and bound behind the line in the direction of travel. When he stops, he calls set and resumes engaging the enemy with his weapon. Then the next man will go, and so on, while everybody who is not currently moving continues to engage targets and suppress the enemy. When the final member of the fireteam completes one iteration of the peel, he calls last man so that the fireteam leader knows that everybody has moved. Then the leader can continue to initiate the peel for as long as necessary until they've broken contact. The standard one man at a time peel is beneficial when you need to keep as many guns in the fight as possible, but still move the unit in a direction. With larger units such as 6 to 9 man squads, you may need to move the unit more rapidly. In that case, multiple individuals may move at once, peeling by 2s or 3s. For example, one of our demo team members who was a Finnish Jaeger mentioned that the Finnish rifle squad, which is organized in 3 teams of 3, will typically peel 3 men at a time. Executed this way, the peel becomes more of a sideways bounding maneuver. The center peel is a little bit different. It's initiated from the column formation when you take contact to the front, so the front 2 individuals immediately return fire. The fireteam leader calls out peel center, and the frontmost man bounds through the center of the column to the rear of the formation. And when he does, the man behind him immediately picks up the fire. And same as the last, the final member of the fireteam to conduct the movement would call last man, and the leader would continue the peel until they've broken contact. The peels are a useful drill to practice because they're an immediate action for breaking contact that supplements the typical bounding maneuvers. They apply to situations and starting formations that aren't well situated for bounding and would otherwise require a formation change before you could initiate a proper break contact. Alright, so that was the Milsimmer's Guide to Fireteam Formations and Movement. Again, because I was non-US military, if there are any US military or Marine infantry vets, please let me know if there's anything I did miss or get wrong, and if so, I can compile a list of footnotes in a pinned comment. But note that there are some things here, like the peel, which are not grounded in typical US doctrine, or simply a difference in SOPs. I hope those of you who watch this found it handy to use in-game with your friends, or that it was at least an entertaining watch. If so, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.